Good afternoon. It is so good to have people sitting in the chairs. Yes. Welcome. I'm Fran Baker, currently the president of Resident Council. And I'd like to introduce Janet Crowell, vice president, and she has something to say for you, or whatever.
This is the time when if you are attending resident council for the first time, we want to recognize you. So, show of hands for the first time. Wow. Oh, there's one back there. I'll come to you. Could you tell us your name, please?
Greg and Bonnie Coulter. We live over on Shamrock in the Villas.
Okay. And where did you move from?
Tulsa.
Well, we were just in Tulsa, so great place to move from to here. Anything else you want to share? Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. Yes. Anyone else that was afraid to put their hand up a minute ago? Okay. Okay. My part is finished.
Okay, next up we have Dan Rexroth. He's CEO of John Knox, and he always has some words that we need to hear.
Thank you, Fran. Good to see you all. This is, I think, the first time we're back together in person for quite a while, so good to see you all. And I love the face-to-face. Well, Happy New Year. This is, no, I don't have early dementia. Happy New Year. It's the John Knox Village new fiscal year that starts April 1st, so I just thought I'd give you just a real quick summary of how we did last year. As we went into the year last year, starting April 1st of 2021, we thought that COVID would be way behind us, and by October we'd be kind of back to normal. That didn't happen, obviously. We had the Delta variant, the Omicron variant. Particularly in our healthcare areas, there was still restrictions on admissions and visitors and all that kind of thing. So the year turned out a little bit different than what we thought, but we did end the year with a slight positive. It's always good. So financially, our operating income was a little bit more than our operating expenses, which is a good thing. The sales were actually better than budget. So entry fee sales were actually about $1 million more than what we had budgeted for the year. So very successful year. We sold a lot of units, and I've got the exact number here, 137 actual sales compared to a goal of 125. So that was good. People still see the value of moving to John Knox Village. As a matter of fact, they even see the value more today than they did pre-COVID. We're hearing that more and more, that people are saying living in community, having the support of the community, having all the benefits of a place like John Knox Village is much, much better than living isolated alone out in the community where you don't have all the resources and support that you do, particularly in pandemic times like we've suffered the last couple of years. So that was good, and obviously we've got a couple of big construction projects and in the meadows, too, and in the villas. So big challenges over the last several months have been, number one, in supply chain, which you've all heard about, different materials and supplies that just aren't available. The other thing that you've been hearing about, I think, probably, has been just escalating costs, inflationary costs, specifically in the construction trades have been tremendous, from everything from 2x4s to aluminum to metal to all kinds of other things. We had some problem with some valves. So fortunately, we locked in our pricing on the Meadows 2 construction project and locked in our pricing on the Villa project prior to inflation really hitting hard. So we had locked in pricing. That helped a lot. And then projects were delayed a little bit, but not dramatically. We think we can make up a little bit of the delay with Meadows 2 project with a little bit quicker move-ins than when we had budgeted, so that we keep right on track with our projections and pro forma before the project started. So that's a little bit of a summary. You know, the care center we're trying to right-size, and which means we're reducing the census there. We've got pressures there, financial pressures there, but we want to continue to serve residents as we feel that's an important part of our mission, to provide that full continuum of care from independent living to assisted living to the skilled care area, and then all of the home care options. We think that's really important. So next year we're going to downsize, which we think will help us mitigate some of the financial pressure we have there. The number one issue we're facing right now is labor. And you all have been, if you've gone to any place of business in the last 6 months, you know that, right? So I'm not telling you anything. We face the same thing that everyone is facing out there, and in our lower paid entry-level positions, particularly nursing, dining, public safety, those have been exceptionally hit hard with labor shortages. We have given 3 pay increases this last year for those lower paid entry-level folks, and it's impacted about, I think, 310 of our associates. So that has been a big positive. The flip side of that is probably every other employer out there is doing the same thing. So some of that is just keeping up with what other people are doing. So that's a significant inflationary pressure on the village to keep increasing wages. I don't think that's the total answer to our dilemma, so we've initiated at least a dozen other ideas to either help recruit people or to retain people. And so matter of fact, a week ago, I was at a meeting with the largest retirement communities in the country, and there's about 12 or 15 of us that get together once a year. We haven't done it the last couple of years because of COVID, but this year we did it, just like I said, just a couple of weeks ago. The focus was on labor and ideas that people are implementing to try and address this labor shortage, which interestingly impacts people from California to New York, Florida to Minnesota, everywhere in the country. It's not just local, it's nationwide. So we're doing all that we can, but thank you for your understanding and for your involvement in helping us kind of navigate through this. We've got to create actually probably new work designs over the course of time to try and save on labor, and I think that that's going to be an interesting process over months and years, because this is not something, everybody is saying, this is not something that's going to go away in the short term. This labor shortage is going to be with us for probably months and likely years to come. So how can we work smarter, maybe save labor, and that's going to be an approach that we're going to have to take. So I could go on, but happy to answer any questions. But again, Happy New Year.
Maria Timberlake is the Vice President of Senior Living, and she has some updates for us.
Hi, everybody. You got your flyer? Good, good. Okay, and there are extras on the piano if you need to take any to friends and neighbors. I'll keep my update to that. Sorry that the clinic isn't sooner. I know some of you have been anxious to get your second booster or your 4th shot, but between room availability and the pharmacist's availability and other staff commitments, that's really when it all came together to make it a reasonable time for us to have the clinics. So again, if you have been part of the clinics before, we're just going to assume that you're going forward. So if you're a yes, You don't need to do anything. We'll have your file. We'll have a start to your paperwork. If you're traveling out of town or visiting with grandchildren and you want to get your shot early, then just give Ginger a buzz. Her name and number and email is on the flyer. I know a number of people have already gotten theirs. We had quite a few people fill up her voicemail over the weekend. So then we pull you out of the schedule, and then we start working on the logistics once we know everybody who's going to be participating. We're going to try to do it in 3 fast and furious days this time instead of 5 days, on the assumption that some people will be dropping out of the process. And we'll have 2 different locations. Monday, May 23rd, will be up at Places, and Wednesday and Thursday, the 25th and 26th, will be up at the Pavilion. Just like before, we'll be giving you individual flyers that tell you your time, and so those will be coming out that week of what would that be? The week of the 16th, the end of that week beforehand. And so we're partnering again with Cimbria. It's the Moderna vaccine. You know the drill. If you are new to the village since the November clinic, you can call Ginger if you want to get looped into our program. There is a way to do that. So the gentleman from Tulsa, Mr. Coulter, I believe it was, if you want to participate, feel free to give Ginger a jingle and we can get you looped in. So there will be one of those boring PowerPoints that I do coming out later with more information as well as the flyers. So as resident leaders who stay in the know, please share this with your friends and neighbors who maybe don't get e-blast or don't attend resident council, so that everybody can be well prepared and we can zip you in and out and try to be as efficient as we can on those days. So we're looking forward to it, and cross this one off the list, right? Hopefully we won't have to do a 5th one. It's my fingers crossed. Thanks.
Next, we have our committee reports. You probably remember we have 5 standing committees, and each month they give a report, and you're going to hear a lot of really interesting information. One of the committees, the nominating committee, who's chaired by Martha Wood, do not meet until later in the year, so Martha will not report. But we'll start with Joe, and we'll just go down the list. Oops. Let's move this, because this gets in the way sometimes.
Kim Clockengay, VP of Finance, gave the financial presentation for March to the Finance Committee in the Missouri Room on 4/27/22. In February, there were 22 sales, which is over budget by 16. For the full FY22, sales are over budget by 32, and entrance fee proceeds were 114% of the annual goal. Lease contracts ended the fiscal year strong, again much higher than the previous year. There were 34 move-ins in March, a strong month. Meadows Phase 2 now has 60% deposits, with April also looking very good. Total occupancy increased in March. Assisted living census increased and is slightly over budget. The census in the Village Care Center was 119, under the new target as staffing continues to limit admissions. While home health admissions were down, overall they had a 4th consecutive good month, partly due to better reimbursement. Hospice continues with low census, and there are some marketing efforts planned in May. EMS had runs over 400 for the month. Billing issues related to the transition to a new billing company continue and are being worked on. Staffing is also a factor. Planning for the future is happening to create a better work environment and enhance the capacity to grow. For March, there was an operating loss of $43,700. As is usual at the end of the fiscal year, there was an effort to get all expenses in and counted. Staffing agency cost was up mostly for the VAL. Utilities in March were over budget, and gas cost was 260% over budget. Year-to-date operating contribution is positive at $298,000, significantly better than what was forecast in January. Investment activity was steady in March, and the final number for the fiscal year is positive at $23,000. Days of cash on hand increased in March due to strong entrance fee proceeds. Debt service coverage ratio remains favorable to budget. Net operating margin reflected a slight decrease due to the operating loss. Mr. Clockengay reviewed with the committee the status of a John Knox investment made in February 2021 with ISNP, Institutional Special Needs Medicare Advantage Plan. This program by American Health Plans has several other Missouri investors. It is a Medicare Advantage Part C plan developed specifically for patients who reside permanently in a nursing home. It would be marketed by AHP to residents in JKV Care Center on a totally elective basis. Currently, JKV has 18 patients signed up for the plan. As the number of enrollees increases, the possibility of income increases. Another very interesting topic for the committee was an analysis which compared the projected 5-year results from a 2016 feasibility study as to what FY22 would look like after building the meadows. This study was done by an outside firm in preparation for obtaining financing. It projected that Meadows Phase 1 would have an operating income after expenses of $2,464,000. The actual FY22 number was $2,178,000 with a variance of only $286,000, which is really close. For the total community, income was projected to be $4,381,000. This compares to the actual income of $298,000. However, if you remove the Meadows income from FY22, there would have been an operating loss of $1,880,000. The overall income was significantly less, mainly due to lower census in the VCC. However, Meadows' operating revenue was right on track, with the actual coming in 2% higher than the feasibility study. The Finance Committee will meet in the Missouri Room on May 25th at 1 o'clock.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Davis. The April 13th Resident Council Health Service Committee was called to order by Chair Mary Ann Davis. 12 members were present, including one new member. The minutes of the March meeting were approved as written. Members were asked to introduce themselves, providing brief information about their lives before JKV. Some of the careers represented, including nursing, therapy, teaching, engineering, criminal justice, and law. Anthony Colombato, Vice President of Health Services, asked what information or speakers the committee members want for future meetings. He mentioned that the speaker at the May meeting will be Brian Opaka. I think I'm saying that correctly. Director of Public Safety, who will update us on the status of JKV ambulance service and answer questions. Responding to a member's question, Anthony said that there's a possibility that JKV Hospice House could reopen. If so, it would be licensed as a hospice and not under the VCC. Those responsible are in beginning discussions with state regulators to see what is required. Although JKV can deliver hospice services anywhere, there is a need for a dedicated hospice house in this area. Staffing has been one challenge in the past. Remodeling of the existing structure would not be necessary, and services such as food and maintenance could be provided by the VCC. Anthony was asked about the dining situation at VCC and responded that the dining room is now open for breakfast and lunch Monday through Friday, including the non-VCC residents. He does not think advance notice is required for non-VC residents because of the new dining program, but will confirm. He agreed that JKV residents should be given notice of the change. Fireside dining remains closed to non-VAL residents due to state regulations. The village is discussing timing for a second COVID booster. A question was raised about the possibility of allowing residents to sign up for daily check-in. This was in response to a neighbor who fell and was unable to reach a pull card. Anthony agreed to explore the possibility. There was a short discussion about wound care, which is something home health could help with if there is a doctor's order. The following suggestions were made for future meetings. A panel from various Lee Summit healthcare facilities to discuss unique services they offer that might be of interest to JKV residents. An update on Parkinson's treatment and a presentation from a physical therapist on exercises to prevent or control incontinence. Anthony closed by saying there are plans for another healthcare clinic in October at the Pavilion. It may include information and areas that are areas not included in the 2021 and in addition to those previously provided. The meeting was adjourned.
Excuse me. I'm Carol Jennings, Chair of the Resident Services Committee. We met April 11th. 12 members were present. Also present were Maria Timberlake, VP of Senior Living, Eric Scott, Director of Operations and Development, and Kelly Snell, Director of Life Enrichment. Maria reported that plans are being made for a vaccination clinic on campus for giving the second booster shot. It will be held in late May. A grant proposal has been submitted for the EMS Building Fund. Gala funds will also be used for the EMS building. In regard to status of renovations around campus, Maria reported that $4.3 million for additional capital improvement around campus had been included in the financing for the Meadows 2 project. So far, funds have been used for renovations done in the assisted living, sidewalks and curbs on Peace Parkway, with a second phase to begin soon, a new roof on the administration building, corridor and unit renovations of F, G, and H, and now work is to begin on renovations in the Villager Inn. Eric Scott said that there will be a new lane for dial-a-ride buses to prevent their blocking of the Villager sidewalk entrance and street. Already approved are roof repairs on the inn and some new equipment in the kitchen. In initial phases are renovations to the Villager Salon. A new facility will be built in the old auxiliary general store area for the salon. Eric Scott said they will be meeting with those who bowl to discuss their needs and suggestions to upgrade the bowling alley. The biggest expense will be the renovation of Places restaurant. Updates will be made on the lobby and corridors. Also, the fitness center equipment will be updated. The foundation will help in getting this new equipment. Kelly Snell spoke of the problems involved each month when it's time to sign up and register for various talks, movies, and trips. The IT group is working on a way to make this less cumbersome. Kelly said that just putting all sign-up costs on our monthly service fee might be one solution. There was some discussion regarding the pros and cons of this. And I think we've gotten an e-blast about a little change in the way we're to sign up for movies. So note that in the e-blast. Pat Heisley questioned the use of parking spots nearby apartments by staff and workmen. She was told that she should contact security as this use of resident parking spots is not permitted. Our next meeting will be Monday, May 9 at 9:30 in the boardroom. Thank you.
I'm Ann Margaret McGuire, Chairman of the Sales, Marketing, and Communications Committee. We met on April the 21st in the Manhattan Room. Mary Beth Roberts, who is the Director of Sales, Marketing, and Communication, gave us a year-end fiscal 20 year, March 31st, 2022 report. I thought Dan was going to give this whole report before I got here, but he didn't give the detailed numbers, which I have. So, the sales and move-ins were very strong, and there is significant carryover in both categories. Lease move-ins was double fiscal year 21 at 93 with a goal of 75. Entry fee move-ins was 41 with a goal of 50. $3,558,679 from actual entry fee move-ins plus $3,568,066 from pending move-ins in fiscal year 23 and $937,387 from conversions add up to $18,064,132 versus a fiscal year 22 year-end goal of $12,610,000. I don't know if you realized what those numbers meant, but because they're huge, but the marketing committee at John Knox, since COVID began, has exceeded its goal every single month, which the marketing committee is always in awe because we can't figure out how they do that, but they might have to write this up and market it. Many factors contributed to fiscal year 22 exceeding goals in entry fee sales and move-ins. One, inventory was available because of units being vacated with residents moving to higher levels of care. Another was conversions, residents changing from lease agreements to entry fee or moving to a larger or newer unit. Additionally, there were significant dollars paid with move-in not occurring until fiscal year 23. Existing campus and D building ended with 733 paying units, just 3 short of 736 goal. Meadows paying units were 97 on goal. Independent living vacates across the entire campus were 15 versus a goal of 12, which doesn't mean that we were wanting people to vacate. It was, that was anticipated being the goal, and there were 15 instead of 12. We gave congratulations to the Sales, Marketing, and Communications Committee for their strong work. The next meeting will be held on Thursday, May 19th at 9:30 in the Manhattan Room. Thank you.
Our program today, you might have a little hint what it's about. So, Maria Timberlake is going to give us a lot of information about the Fair Housing Law and how it applies to us. Do you want this in there?
I'm going to put it in the thing, yeah.
Okay.
And it's so exciting that Dan has chosen to leave. Sorry, I had to, Dan, sorry. I had to do that. Maybe it wasn't so wise. But. He told me he was leaving. It's all right. Go get your pink slip. I do have my performance review coming up, so that maybe wasn't so smart of me. This is an interesting topic, and I was really a bit taken aback when I did this presentation for the Resident Services Committee meeting a couple months ago. And what precipitated it was at one of our Resident Council Executive Committee meetings, Janet Krull, on behalf of some of the district meetings she had attended, raised the fact that there were some concerns about some of the new resident move-ins, and whether, I believe the phrase was, why did marketing put them here? And so I gave a little 2-minute presentation about fair housing, and then Carol and I connected and we said, why don't we make that the topic of the next Resident Council Resident Services Committee meeting? And it was a lengthy presentation. I have tried to shorten it up. I pulled out a few slides. And afterwards, everybody was like, this is really good information. We think you need to share it at a Resident Council meeting. So here I am. I'm not sure. Oops, did it already go? Okay. So, fair housing law is an anti-discrimination law, and it was enacted to prohibit discrimination in housing. And it was part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, and then there were some amendments in 1989. And it falls under the jurisdiction of HUD, which is Housing and Urban Development. So these are federal laws. Oops. So it protects against discrimination based on race, color, religion, and national origin. Those were the founding categories. And over the years, some additional things have been added, including sex, familial status, and disability. And familial status is, for instance, an apartment complex couldn't prohibit a family from moving in. So that's what that means. So there is a limited exception for discrimination on the basis of age, because we do that here at John Knox Village, correct? So housings for older persons are allowed. And in fact, if we had too many youngsters, if you will, we could lose that exemption. I think this is maybe, is this a clicker? I don't trust it. I'm going to just keep on going. There we go. So who does it cover? Who does fair housing cover? It covers all types of housing, public, private, with 4 or more units. So in our industry, that would include senior housing, life plan communities. That's what John Knox Village is. Formerly, we called ourselves continuing care retirement communities, assisted living facility, skilled nursing facilities, and group homes for people with disabilities. So who does it not cover? It would not cover or not be applicable for services that don't have a residential base. So adult daycare, where somebody is only coming, for a period of time during the day, or home health or EMS. So does that make sense? There's no housing component to it. Another area it doesn't cover would be non-commercial organizations. So convents would not be required to comply with fair housing law. I find that interesting. Okay, so why does John Knox Village need to be concerned about that? It's a fair question. First of all, those categories and that goal is very broad, and I'm going to share a little bit more detail as we go. And it continues to evolve as there are new court cases and challenges and new situations that come up. And HUD has enforcement goals. And what they do is they contract with advocacy groups. So these are advocacy groups that are advocating for a specific category that I covered. And they hire them as testers or secret shoppers. So, I could show up at a retirement community and say, I'm looking for my mom, and I have this set of, my fictional mom. And then Janet could go and she could do the same thing. And if we gave the same information, but maybe one of us was drilled about some of the details, we could claim that there was discrimination. And that'll make a little bit more sense as I go forward. There's also increased awareness and action on the part of consumers, people knowing their rights and expected to be treated accordingly. So one of the hot spots, if you will, is in the area of disability. And that becomes a little bit complicated when you get out of the independent living part of a community like ours and into assisted living or skilled nursing, because in some cases, the state regulations, let's just say for assisted living, and fair housing law can contradict each other. And then you have, murky waters to maneuver. Also, in cases where discrimination has been found, you can be penalized financially. And so as a management team, one of our goals is to keep us out of hot water, right? So that we don't incur the costs of legal costs that are unnecessary or lawsuits. And so we always want to be compliant with the law. And our intent may not be necessary, or is not necessary. So we could accidentally violate fair housing law, and we could still be liable for damages. And then there can just be bad PR. My goal is to stay off the front page of the Kansas City Star because we've done something wrong. So there is a lot of concern. And I should point out, any of you who've been out there in the working world know that there are a whole lot of regulations that we have to comply with. Fair labor standards, occupational safety and health. There's a ton of regulations. Joe's nodding her head. She used to work in the legal arena. So this is just one category, and it's complex all to itself. So how does fair housing really apply in senior living? It's really three categories. One of those is marketing and advertising. And I could do a whole other presentation on that, but we're not going to talk about that today. Another has to do with accessibility, which kind of works hand in glove with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the third area, our area of focus today, is on admissions, transfers, and discharges, okay? So what are some of the issues? Well, first of all, who's eligible to live at John Knox Village? Eligibility criteria. What inquiries can you or can't you make about disabilities? Who gets to make the choice where they live? Is that the marketing consultant or is it the client? Whose choice is it? How do we provide equal access so that somebody who has a disability can fully enjoy the same things that those without disabilities can enjoy? How do we create an integrated setting of people with all sorts of capabilities? And then how do we offer reasonable accommodations when somebody needs a little extra accommodation in order to fully enjoy the premises? So our ongoing objectives in any regulatory environment in which we work is to ensure we're compliant, right? That's pretty simple. We also want to be fair and consistent. If we're not consistent and that were to come to light, then we could be penalized for that. We also want to educate people, whether they're an incoming resident or somebody who's lived here for a while, about what their options are, but respect their choices. And we want to support people living successfully at whatever level of care they're in. We want people to be, safe and happy and being able to enjoy what we have to offer. But we do want to tighten control where we can, and that'll make more sense here going forward. Okay, so let's look at some of the prohibitions. So it is against fair housing law for us to impose eligibility criteria to screen out people with disabilities. It's even unlawful to inquire about disabilities. It's also a prohibition to offer different terms or conditions to a resident because of a disability. So in short, people with disabilities have extra rights under the law. So what is a disability? A person is said to have a disability if he or she has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity, has a record of such impairment, or is regarded to have such an impairment. Cut and pasted out of my little primer that I have. So what is a major life activity, right? Major life activity refers to functions such as caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, walking, hearing, seeing, speaking, breathing, learning, and working. Take out my contact lenses, I'm a mess, okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about this a little bit more geared to incoming residents, but it also applies to anybody who's here for however long. So incoming residents coming in on a lease contract, otherwise known as rental contracts or annual contracts, we've referred to them differently. There is no health assessment. We don't screen out people with disabilities. We don't inquire about disabilities. We don't collect their medical records, and we don't do any nurse interviews. Because doing so, when all we're doing is providing housing, would be prohibited activity. Now, some of you are sitting in the audience and say, well, I had to get my doctor to send my medical records, and I had to sit down with a nurse. You're right. If you came here on an entry fee contract, you did have a nurse interview. We did collect your medical records. There is allowance under the law that lets us do that because we share in the future risk of your health care. We share financially in your health care, right? Because you're prepaying for your future health care if you need it, but you're not paying the full cost of that, right? The village is taking its bet that not all of you are going to need that service. So we actuarially price those entry fee contracts just like an insurance underwriter would. And so we are allowed to ask actuarially based questions to understand the risk of giving you that entry fee contract. So there is a difference between those two groups of residents. So, well, if we can't ask questions about somebody's health, what control do we have? Do we have to accept everybody? It's a good question. We do not have to accept a resident, incoming or ongoing, if they were to impose any kind of undue administrative or financial burden to the village, or if they, admitting them or having them stay here would fundamentally alter the nature of the programs or operations. This is where I always stop and give an example. Are you guys okay if I used you in here? Okay. So, fundamentally alter the nature of the program. What does that mean exactly? Okay. Janet moves into an apartment. She's lived here like 7 years. Okay? Everybody loves Janet. Janet's starting to show some signs that she's aging. She's, sorry, you said it was okay. So, well, we're all aging, right? I have a milestone birthday next week with a 0 at the end. And it's not a 5 before it. So there you go. So, you know, she's putting her garbage out on the wrong day. And she's asking Joe, her neighbor, the same question over and over again. Those kinds of things, right? But everybody loves Janet. It's okay. They're keeping an eye on her. Joe even talks to her daughter from time to time just to check in. At some point, she's going to need to go to assisted living or the care center. But it's all right now. Okay, then I move in. I do the exact same thing. You don't know me. You don't really care about me yet because you haven't gotten to know me. All of a sudden, I'm a problem, right? That new person, Maria, she's putting her trash out on the wrong day. And she keeps asking us, how on earth do I get to the Courtyard Cafe? She should have been, you know, why did marketing put her in independent living? She needs to be in assisted living. Okay, you guys, you know, you've heard those kind of conversations, right? Okay, allowing me to move in does not fundamentally alter the nature of our program when Janet's living here in the same condition, right? Does that make sense? So we have to be really careful that if there are already people living here like that, we can't say somebody new coming in can't come in that same status of life, okay? Now, we can disallow somebody from moving in if they're a threat to others. Note that others is underlined. It is okay for somebody to be a threat to themselves. Does that make us all incredibly uncomfortable? Yes. But fair housing isn't about protecting health and safety. It's about protecting your civil rights. So therein sometimes can lie the rub, and we have to work through those situations. So what we have is a form that you all, unless there's somebody who's lived here about 30 years, is Margaret Rindham in the room? She's, I think, our longest resident. So filled out a requirements of tenancy form. And so basically what we do is we go over that with the clients when they're coming in, and we say these are, where did I just put it? Here it is. I'm dropping papers. You know, this is what you need to do to be able to stay in this environment, you know, and it is ongoing. So yes, it's Maria moving in needs to sign this, But Janet, at year 10, we may be talking about her inability to do these things. And so it is a common thread for all of you who have read the resident handbook cover to cover. There are a lot of references about the requirements of tenancy. Blah, blah, blah. Non-compliance with this policy may constitute a violation of the requirements of tenancy and may result into, up to and including termination of your contract. There's a phrase like that sprinkled throughout a lot of the policies in the handbook. So we do say, that it is a common thread, whether you're coming in or staying for 20 or 25 years, can you meet the requirements of tenancy? So we can have those discussions around those things. And if you go into your little blue bag that most of you got when you moved in, you'll find a copy of your requirements of tenancy form, or if any of you want me to send it to you, if you're curious, I'd be happy to send it. So in short, a resident should possess the following capabilities: must be capable of maintaining the household, must be capable of living in a communal living environment, must be capable of managing personal care. So under each of those, there's 3, 4, 5 bullets that go into more detail. However, you don't have to be able to do that yourself. You can do that with third-party assistance, right? So I don't have to go pick up after my dog if I hire somebody to walk my dog and pick up after them, right? There's a whole lot of examples where I don't have to manage my own medication. I can hire village helpers to do that for me, or my daughter could do it for me. My daughter probably will be doing it for me at some point. So we can also, discuss reasonable accommodations. If somebody says, I need to live here, I need some kind of modification of a policy that helps me live here successfully. One that's often used in little educational primers like this, which is one our insurance company just sent out. Again, if anybody wants it, I can email it to you. Is there are communities that don't allow pets, but a reasonable accommodation is allowing somebody with a service animal to live there. I mean, you have to do that, period. So what we have to do is say, hey, are you ready, willing, and able to meet the requirements of tenancy? And people say, sure I am. Let me sign here. But guess what happens sometimes? They're not able to. Or they live here 5 years or 10 years and then are not able to. And that's when we revisit those and say, we need to start talking about your next steps. So placement. I do hear that. Why did marketing put them here? Under fair housing, we always want the most integrated setting possible. So if somebody in a wheelchair wants to be on the 3rd floor of the apartment complex, that's just fine if that's their choice. Now we can say, you might be able to get out faster in the event of an emergency if you are on the 1st floor, but they have a right to say, no, I want to be on the 3rd floor because I really want that view. So we have to respect that choice. Now, when there is a non-discriminatory basis for declining occupancy, or for that matter, kicking somebody out, we can do that, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And again, if there is a direct threat to others, not a direct threat to the self, we can also address that. So a direct threat. If a resident presents a direct threat to health and safety of others, or tenancy will result in substantial property damage and no reasonable accommodation will mitigate the direct threat. So, I need to make it clear that a direct threat is more than fear, speculation, or stereotype. We are all guilty of drawing conclusions, jumping to conclusions. And I can tell you that we as staff do that sometimes ourselves. We'll find out about perhaps a new resident moving in and we're like, oh, this is not going to be good. And guess what? Sometimes they do super well. They just need it to be someplace that had all the services they need. Somebody else could move in and the rug gets pulled out from under them. You just never know. But the thing is, we can't, if you're just like, oh, Maria needs to be in assisted living, that's not going to cut it. What is the objective measurement of that? So that really is an individual assessment. It may be different for me than Joe, than Janet, than Fran. Is there any substantial property damage that we're causing? What is the objective evidence? So one of the things we have to do is focus on conduct or behavior, not on disabilities, not on somebody's health condition. So if somebody can be incontinent, that's considered a disability. If they're managing their incontinency well, that's just fine. However, if they're in violation of sanitation standards, and despite trying to get proper help and support in over a period of time, they cannot maintain the household themselves or with third-party assistance, then that would be a problem. If somebody has memory loss and they're setting off fires, setting off the smoke alarm all the time, then it's not about their memory loss, it's about the setting up fires, right? The potential to cause harm to property or to others. So if somebody's just cooking and they set off the smoke alarm and they do it once in a blue moon, okay, no big deal. But if they had a fire because their purses were in the oven or something like that, and, those kind of things. Now, a reasonable accommodation might be unplugging the stove, right? And they don't have their stove anymore. And that might be a next step before they would end up going to a higher level of care. Alcoholism is also considered a disability. Somebody can be, if they're a happy alcoholic in their own home, okay. But if they're knocking on people's doors at 3 in the morning and being disruptive, that's not acceptable. And then there's the safety of others. So again, I hope you can see that it's not about the disability, or it's about the behavior. And that's where the requirements of tenancy comes in. Are people's behaviors consistent with those communal living expectations? So on an ongoing basis, we monitor real-life cases. And there's kind of 2 areas that are becoming the hot topics. One's on emotional support animals. Did you all read some of the articles about the kinds of animals people are trying to bring on the airplanes these days? I did read one about a peacock, and I'm not making that up. Emotional support peacock. That is starting to come into play. When is it a service animal, and when is it an emotional support animal? And did you know you can go to Amazon and you can order those little vests for your dog that say, support animal or whatever, and it could just be your pet. So then how do we manage through that tricky water? Sexual orientation, gender identity, LGBTQ issues also kind of becoming more prominent as they are in other areas of legislation. So what do? We use our industry resources. Like I said, we just got this, it's called the Fair Housing Act and Independent Living, a refresher on what not to ask. So our insurance company, our industry association send out information. We from time to time consult with our legal counsel. It's always our goal to be consistent in our application of fair housing law, and are consistent in our policies and procedures and have good documentation. And I can tell you we have had 2 fair housing claims made against us that were investigated, and because we followed our policies and procedures, we were not found liable. So sometimes when people hear us say policies and procedures, it's like, yeah, there she goes again. There's a reason for that. So whenever we're updating policies, we're always like, does fair housing come into play? From time to time, we educate our staff, residents, volunteers, and really we try to work with residents individually as they deserve our respect to their unique circumstances. So what are the potential negatives of that? People can make a bad choice, right? Sometimes we see that. We know they're making a bad choice. And if we can't do that health assessment up front for the lease contract holders, we're not able to predict their needs. Because if we know about a certain set of circumstances before somebody comes here, and we can start weaving that web of support with our programs and services ahead of time, we can help somebody flourish. And that's when we feel we have a success story. But if we don't have that information, we may not be able to do that. And so sometimes we have people who come in and struggle, and then that takes time from staff away from other residents, other needs. And sometimes that means that there's, an earlier service utilization and sometimes a shorter residency. And we get complaints from other residents. I mean, you guys do that. Sometimes there's situations that are uncomfortable. and you want to make sure we know about those. And unfortunately, sometimes that means problems are addressed on the back end, and that obviously is not the best way to solve problems, but sometimes that happens. It also can put the village in a position of liability, and that's what we try to avoid. So what are some of the positives? Well, having that requirements of tenancy document allows us to have some upfront discussion and hopefully reduce the chance of problems later on if we can revisit that requirements of tenancy. But quite frankly, if it's 15 years between when somebody signed the form and they never read the resident handbook or heard me talk about it, they may not remember the commitment they made when they signed that piece of paper. Another positive is that it respects choice and supports people as individuals as their needs change. There are differences. People can have a very similar situation, but if they have financial resources or they don't have financial resources, how those are handled could be very different. If they have in-town family or out-of-town family or no family, the same set of circumstances can play out differently. So we really try to make sure we're looking at the unique needs of each person. And then our policies and systems should always enhance our compliance and hopefully then reduce that legal exposure. So when residents have concerns about other residents, they are often very valid. And we want you to share those concerns. Most often, not always, but most often staff is already aware. I think you guys know, or a lot of you do, that every Wednesday we have a group that meets. It's called the Resident Care Committee. It's an interdisciplinary group of staff who get together and they talk about residents who are in need or in transition or who are violating policies or whatever the case may be. And there's housekeeping and security and the chaplains and the area managers and home health and hospice and the village care center and a village assisted living. And so if somebody, you know, and sometimes we get different information from different pieces of the organization. So the housekeeper may know something that the rest of us don't because they're in the home. Or, you know, home health starts coming. We want to make sure that we as a JKV team are on the same page. We all have the same information. And how are we best going to help that resident? And it could be something like a resident's adult child died suddenly and unexpectedly, and we know that they're grieving. Or it could be that somebody is crashing and burning and there's no family, and what do we do? And everything in between. Just normal, somebody has progressed and they need to go to a higher level of care. So it's a very collaborative process. And it is treated with privacy and confidentiality. And, you know, it is also open to subjectivity. For instance, the stylist who is, you know, here's Maria, this resident who's struggling again. The stylist may have an opinion about what that area manager should do about me. And Janet, my neighbor, might have an opinion about, you know, what to do about me. So everybody might have an opinion, and what we have to do is go through a process, right? And so this last bullet, when it's your turn, when you're the one that people are sharing concerns about, you are going to want us to treat you with confidentiality and protect your privacy. So if you go to your area manager or you come to me and you have concerns about your neighbor, I may assure you that we're aware of the situation and are involved, but we're not going to tell you what we're doing. And I know, yes, there are people who are just out and out nosy, but I know most of the time those concerns are really rooted in concerns, that you are really concerned. And sometimes, you know, you know everything because you're just in the loop. But it is really important, and I know sometimes people want some assurance that we're on a certain track. But I can tell you that there are things that go super smoothly, and there are things that take very twisty, turny roads, and you know. But we're not going to share the details with anybody else. How are we on time? Do you want me to do one of those scenarios that I did at the meeting? Okay. Let me see. I'm dropping my papers. Okay. Okay, I'm going to give you a scenario. Hold on. I'm getting parched.
Drinking on the job.
There are some days. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay. Two different individuals come in looking for IL placement for their relatives on the same day. Since the potential residents are not present, the marketing agent asks the first individual if her relative, which is an uncle, is healthy and independent, a seemingly innocuous question. The individual replies that her uncle is perfectly fine, independent, and uses a wheelchair. The marketing agent then tries to steer the potential resident away by suggesting to the niece that her uncle might be better suited to a higher level of care and stating that the IL residence isn't exactly wheelchair friendly, among other discouraging comments. A few hours later, the next individual looking for IL placement for her relative, her father-in-law, meets with the same marketing agent. The marketing agent asks if the individual's father-in-law is healthy, and the individual responds affirmatively. The marketing agent does not ask any further questions regarding the potential resident's health or independence. What do you think? The scenario above constitutes a violation of fair housing. Imposing terms that require residents to be healthy and or able to live independently is strictly forbidden and constitutes discrimination based on disability under the Fair Housing Act. But remember, merely inquiring about the same constitutes discrimination under the Fair Housing Act as well. And this is actually taken from a case, the United States versus Resurrection Retirement Community et al. The relatives who made the inquiries on behalf of the potential residents were undercover agents sent to the community by the Department of Justice. The defendant community in this case was required to pay $200,000 into a fund to compensate the class of individuals that had been discriminated against, as well as a $20,000 civil penalty to the federal government in addition to having to change its policies and procedures. That is not a good use of $220,000. Yes. So there's a lot of scenarios out there that, we just have to be careful of. And, I was glad that this came up. I'm glad Janet raised the concern. This is the benefit of resident council, right? What's on people's mind? Hey, how come those people are here? Let's use a committee meeting. Everybody was really engaged that day. I thought people might get a little bored because it's long and not the most glamorous topic, right? But it is important to talk about because these are the things that management has an obligation. I mean, you should expect us to take our regulatory compliance very seriously to avoid problems that are going to be costly. And so, this is one that I think everybody wants employees to work safe. Everybody knows that, this, that, and the other thing. But, this is very real. And again, not only do we not want the cost or the bad publicity, we don't want people to feel like they're not welcome, right? We want to be a welcoming community. And so there's all sorts of reasons to do it. And so it is woven throughout, again, our new admissions practices as well as on an ongoing basis. And, the area managers and I talk every week about people who might be struggling and how we might best try to get people to understand the benefits of moving to a higher level of care. And then some people are very proactive and they just go there all on their own. So, but with 1,029 residents or however many we have at the moment, you're going to have a range of people, a range of abilities, a range of disabilities, a range of capabilities and backgrounds. And that's the beauty of the village, I think. So we want to support people. We want to be compliant. We want to do the right things for the right reasons. And that includes complying with fair housing. So that's what I got. Any questions? Yes, John. Ooh, it's working.
It seems that as staff here, there is an awareness of when we all need to go to another level of care, correct?
We try to remain aware. I mean, sometimes something might precipitate us becoming more
Sure.
involved.
Right. And one of the things that seems to come up a lot is falling.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to protect us and to assist us, we would be consulted with probably first-line area manager, if not a family member, that perhaps you need assisted living.
Well, we wouldn't even jump that. There's probably conversations between or before that, just about sometimes people, especially if you're here on an entry fee contract and you have those discounted home care hours, if we see somebody who maybe is needing some extra support, we want to make sure, remind you that you have those hours in your contract and you can get those Village Helpers hours at half price, and that might help somebody stay in independent living a little longer. We do a falls report. It's discussed at the care committee, so we might try to get somebody to the balance clinic and then to physical therapy. Perhaps they need an assistive device. So there can be a lot of baby steps before a big stride. Though sometimes things happen that are more severe that do, kind of do catapult people.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there is a progression of intervention
Yes.
to meet the needs
Yes.
of the resident who may be in danger to themselves.
We would always try that, yes.
Sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can tell you there have been a couple of times that we have literally called the adult child and said, come get mom or dad. But those have been when they were sexually inappropriate with a staff member.
Okay. Now, would
Yeah, that happens too, but we're not going to do a presentation on
would
that.
family
Not very often.
would family members always be in safe grounds if they were making all of the decisions to move a resident without their understanding?
You're getting into a more complex area because not all residents have given us the permission to talk to family members. We have residents who say, do not call my son unless I'm dead. And then we have family members who say, why didn't you call me? Well, it's because we asked. I can tell you that we get that on the ambulance, for example. Somebody not feeling well, and we take them to the hospital. Who do you want us to call? Don't call my kids. And then the daughter calls and yells at Brian because we didn't call. So we have to respect people's rights if they want their family involved or not. If it got to the point where we really felt like the resident was to a certain point, there are times that I've said, go ahead and call the daughter and we'll deal with any backlash that may occur. Because at some point, it is hard. We do have some people here who don't have family, and that can be hard if they don't have their advance directive paperwork or their, a POA. A lot of adult children like to say, I have power of attorney, but if there hasn't been something that has kicked that into action, we default to the resident. So I can tell you that will make an adult child mad at times. They won't understand what rights they really have with a POA versus getting a guardianship. And so that's, let me divert for a minute, have those discussions with your family members, please. And we do, we were going to have an advance directive seminar back in 2020, whenever it was going to be, but we haven't had one of those for a while. We will do one of those next spring to encourage people to really understand what's the difference between, a POA for financial and a medical and a guardianship. And we have had to, tell some family members, if you really think your mom's that bad, you need to apply for guardianship, but we don't think she's that bad.
So you or associates would notify us as residents if we are being moved?
Yes, we would never just up and move you. No,
Without your knowledge?
No, we would not do that. There have been residents who've been a little clueless about what's happening. They haven't remembered. They'll sit down and have the conversation, and then it's like, okay, today's the day, and they've forgotten that. But no, we will default to making sure that we're communicating with the resident. You are our customer. Your children are not our customers. They're our secondary customers. So you come first, always.
Thank you.
Good question, though. It puts us in sticky situations at times. Joe asked if you do have the POA type forms, if we can have a copy of those on file, that is helpful. Yeah. And I think that there's just, sometimes families just haven't dealt with these issues, and then they don't know how to deal with those issues. You know what I mean? So it may be something new or different. And then some people, I can think of a couple families that are here, they moved in younger because they met with some of those uncertainties when their own parents passed away or became ill, and they're just like, okay, we're buttoning it down for our children. We don't want to do that to our children, what my parents did to me. Yes, Mrs. Slosky?
I have a question. The only place I've noticed where you actually require or want to have a POA or anything is in your ice packet that you usually post on your refrigerator. Marketing never asked us for a copy or anything, so that where is a central file if you were going to have that stuff?
The central files are in the finance office under lock and key. So there's, and then we do pull those documents into Health Medics, which is our resident documentation system, and there's certain categories that certain people have access to and other people do not. So
Okay,
it's
so should I
password
be sending
protected.
that over since?
Yeah,
'cause I will make a comment. When my husband got drastically ill, I mean, we went through the whole medical procedure. He had cancer when he arrived here, but his cancer progressed. And basically, when we signed him up for hospice, they asked me for his POA and everything else like that. And we had all that in hand. And they asked me also about a DNR. And he was compass enough to tell them that, yes, he wanted a do not resuscitate order. But anyway, we had filled out a booklet that was provided by the Missouri Bar that actually went through all of those questions and stuff. And so because we had filled that out when we were on our farm, I just showed them a copy of that, and they accepted that. We didn't have to go to a notary, take them to a notary, and all this kind of stuff to get an actual formal DNR. But there's a lot of sticky wickets, I guess you might say.
You're right.
In dealing with all of this stuff. Now, and I have tried to deal with it going forward, and I do not have family. And I have family, but they would never be someone that I would appropriate to take care of me. But in any case,
you're not the only one in that situation.
I mean, they are far away, and I would never call them. But anyway, so I have a third party POA, and I do not have a backup for that person. So if something should happen to her, guardianship would have to be considered.
Right.
And I know my attorney told me that, and he said, you should continue to look for someone that can be a backup for her. And I said, yes, I understand. But at some point, my guess is that there will have to be, if she can no longer handle it, there will be something in the way of conservatorship, guardianship, or whatever that might be. So I just don't know how that process would transpire here.
Yeah, I would say if you're part of a couple, make sure that you guys are on the same page. If you're a single person and you have that family member or two, have those conversations. If not, having your financial advisor, your attorney, your doctor being well aware. We do have a couple residents here who basically are guardians of the public administrator's office. But that's generally because they ran out of assets and they have no family. So it sounds like you're doing all the right things. And if you gave documents to hospice, they would be in our system.
My husband's documents, since he's passed away.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I don't know.
But it is helpful for us. The problem is if we have something on file and then you update it and you don't give us the update. So it is important. Missouri Bar Association is a good resource, and so is the Center for Practical Bioethics. Do any of you remember going to the Caring Conversations seminars that we had? That is also a booklet, and it's meant to sit down with your family members and have those discussions. In fact, my daughter is now 26, and I need to update my information because I did it well, I'm not going to tell you how long ago I did it, that I'm out of date. And I only have one daughter, and my siblings are all out of state. So, I've got backup plans here until family could get here and that kind of thing. It becomes complicated. But if you have an attorney, some residents don't have an attorney that they see. They've just executed a document, and they don't necessarily have a family attorney. So there are different ways of covering those bases, and you need to do it in a way that's comfortable for you, but the point is to do it, that's important. It's important if you have children to try to make it easier for them when they're going to be going through a grieving process or making difficult decisions about, because there's a lot of guilt if somebody has to make the decision to move somebody to a higher level of care, or there can be. So, but you all are here, and we're here to help you, and hopefully help you with, the respect and the individual support that you deserve as a member of our community. And what that means for one person isn't going to be the same as what it means for somebody else. And that's what we always strive for and work hard to do. So. Well, thanks for indulging me. I know we went a little long compared to other meetings, but I appreciate being asked to talk about something we don't talk about very often. So, thank you.
I have a few little reminders for you. One, if you are interested in one of the committees that you heard reports from today, you can call the committee chair and ask to visit. It is important to remember that you do need to have volunteer training in order to be on a committee, and you can set that up through Kelly Snell. The other thing is that if you make a reservation for a movie or an event and then you find you can't go, be sure to cancel it so someone else can use it. That would just be the polite thing to do and make life easier for a lot of people. But on a happier note, we want to get to know each other better. And one way we can do that is if you update your profile at JKV Life. So you can go into JKV Life, go into the residence page, find your name, and then edit profile. You can add your email address, clubs if you were in the military, if you like rock climbing, mountain biking, whatever your interests are. And then it makes it easier for us, other people, to find you as well. So if you haven't done that, it's easy to do, and it's also helpful for others to get to know you. Our next meeting is going to be really, really interesting, too. It's June 6th. It'll be here with people. And Pat Clement, who is the director of the John Knox Community Theater Group, will be our speaker. Since COVID, we haven't heard much about the theater group. So we're looking forward to hearing about some of the history from that and what's going on now. And maybe you want to get involved. So come see us then. Thank you.